Perhaps her biggest policy idea yet, the presidential candidate wants to wipe out student loan debt for 42 million Americans. She explains here how her plan would work.
Anyone who's got outstanding student loan debt can have up to $50,000 worth of student loan debt canceled out so long as their income is under $100,000. Then it kind of steps in up to there's no help for anybody whose family income is above $250,000. And that's it. The debt's gone.
But how would her over $1 trillion proposal be paid for? Warren wants to use a wealth tax on millionaires and billionaires to cover the cost. I like talking about policy stuff, so let me just go around here. She's flooding the zone with policy proposals, Jesse. It's like every day. You can't even catch up with her because she's throwing all the things out there. But in a Granite State poll today, she's at 5%. 6 months ago in August, she was at 17%. So she's lost that much ground despite all these proposals.
Yeah, and Mayor Pete and Sanders are surging in that same poll. I like the thought behind this. I don't think Republicans should cede this ground to Democrats. Republicans have to come out with an idea themselves about how to tackle student loan debt because it is an enormous problem in this country. I think her idea behind it is unconstitutional. You can't just seize wealth from people. You have to have an income tax. And I don't think she really cares if it's unconstitutional or not. It's more of a PR gimmick for her. But instead of doing something like that, why don't they create a foundation that large corporations and Americans and other foundations can contribute to tax-free, and then students with overwhelming debt can then apply to see if they can wipe out some of that debt for them. It has to be done through the private sector because the private sector is the entity that's suffering the most from students with overwhelming debt because they're not moving out of their parents' basements and going spending any money.
And they're defaulting. But Greg, could this be the mother of all moral hazards, right? Because if the only entities that are on the hook are the taxpayers, then the costs for college are not going to go down.
This is theft. Forgiving this debt, this money isn't just disappearing, it's being taken from somebody. Why don't we also do car loans? Why don't we do home loans? How about my loans to the pawn shop? Right? How is that any different?
Credit cards.
Yes, but credit cards. This does not, and by the way, this doesn't hurt the people you want to hurt. Colleges, right? They already made the money. You want the colleges with their bloated bureaucracy and infrastructure. You want them to be poked and popped because let's face it, because the loans were so easy, that's what inflated the infrastructure and inflated the tuition, tripled the tuition in over 2 decades. It's because they got the money. So I'm for free college. I want college to be free just so the massive bureaucracies are destroyed. And there's a way to do that. If corporations reject the virtue signaling of advanced degrees and embrace online academia, online colleges can do it. That could be free. Military service, priority over college, just alternative educations, trade schools, make elite diplomas that cost so much money worthless, and that's great because the problem is the loans were too easy, and she's so desperate. She's like a dog. She's like a child banging pots and pans in the kitchen. Yeah. She can't get enough. She wants noise, and it's not working.
The other thing is, Emily, that this wasn't detailed in the proposal, but that if your debt is forgiven, it's like winning a car on a game show.
Right.
You have to pay taxes on that. So then, let's say you get $150,000 forgiven, you still have to come up with 25% of that in order to pay the tax.
Totally. Do you guys remember that scene in 16 Candles where like the grandmother walks in and she opens the donut box with a cigarette and she's like, voila, breakfast is served. That's how I feel like this is. It's a total oversimplification and completely missing the point. So when she talks about eradicating tuition, what do we think the majority of tuition covers? The pension. And remember how we've talked about this before, the entire pension debacle that states' bankruptcies are mired in. So if she thinks that any type of unions would go for this or that it makes any fiscal economic sense that, 2 + 2 = 4, it doesn't in this case. And for in California, for example, this generation is literally paying for the genius decision of 10 and 20 years ago to eradicate certain extra payments for their pension, whatever. It's basically, it's so much more complicated than she's making it seem. And it 100% doesn't add up. She should incentivize businesses to hire students, to have interns, to then hire employees.
Not like happening under her. But Juan, do you think that other Democrats and Biden is going to announce on Wednesday are going to come forward with some sort of a plan like this? And does it help the people who need it the most?
Absolutely. So, Greg was saying he wants to hurt the college, but I think the idea here is to help the students, and in specific, students who already have accrued substantial debt and are out of school. There are plans are now in place, of some people talking about them, Dana, among Democrats to help in the future people who would incur future debt. But there's so many people right now struggling with student debt.
Yeah.
And when you think about this, whatever she said, I think is, by the way, her plan is reasonable to my ears. But what strikes me is there's no plan from the Republicans. Right? The Republicans aren't debating it. In fact, it seems to me Republicans have given up on the whole idea of running up crazy tax debts and deficits and all that because Trump has no plan and we see the deficit rising every day.
I think
she wants to use this money to help young people who are trying to move ahead. And by the way, Greg, those online schools, a lot of fraud. We just saw recently by the Trump administration pointing out Secretary DeVos and others. You've got to look at what's good for young people who
fraud in all college.
America.
There's a lot of fraud, as we can tell, in other colleges. I think online is the way to go, and I hope that that's what happens.
All right. Well, I think we shall tease now. Jussie Smollett.